I'm honored to be here. There are two main reasons that I've been able to do in my career all the things I've been able to do. One of them is my father. My father is a native son. He grew up on Massoyat Avenue in Springfield, Massachusetts. He joined the Army at the age of 17, served in World War II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War. He went to the 6th grade, but he believed in higher education, and somehow, on a sergeant's pay, was able to send 4 kids to college. Thank you, Dad. The second reason I'm here is UMass. I wasn't your best student. I'll admit, I may not even have gotten in these days, but, I joke that I might have spent as much time in the Blue Wall pub, it was a pub back then, as I did the library. But despite that, Marv Rausch, chemistry professor, recognized me on a Friday afternoon lab class. That lab class went to 5 in the afternoon, sometimes 6, and asked me to do a summer internship. And I took him up on that, and for the next 14 months, GRC was my second home. And I thrived in that lab environment. The interactions with graduate students and postdocs, the chatter, was just, it was an amazing environment. And I was a lab rat in many ways, as they used to call people back then. But the idea of being in a lab, it converted science from a history lesson to actually an exploration. You got to actually do things, make things that had never been made before. And you had the chance to think ideas that had never been thought before. Not that I did a lot of those back then, but you had that chance. And so UMass gave me that opportunity, and coming out of there, I wanted to do science, and that launched my career. I was convinced I wanted to go to graduate school, and did. So thank you, UMass. Now there's one other story, short story I'll tell before I step down, and this is encouragement to get undergraduates into lab. So, as someone, that lab rat who hung out in GRC, I knew a lot of graduate students, and one of the graduate students I knew was in the polymer science department, and he was working on this project that fascinated me. And it involved, and my memory is fairly imperfect, but the idea stuck, and it was taking drugs and incorporating them into polymers, peptidic polymers with specific sequences. And the idea was that these would be broken down selectively in different parts of the body. And not that I really understood it back then, but the idea of delivering a drug selectively to a tissue where disease was stuck in my mind. And I dreamed about that. And at Gilead Sciences, where I have a fairly big lab, about 15 years ago, 16 years ago, I put a lot of people on site-specific delivery of drugs. And today, now, we are about to launch our 3rd drug for HIV that specifically targets the same cells, white cells, that HIV replicates in. It allows you a much more potent drug, a much more cost-effective, a much more lower dose, and a safer drug. And that drug is rapidly becoming the backbone for all HIV therapy. The drug is at such a low dose that in the third world, in the developing world, it'll be sold for 2 or 3 cent pennies a day, which is unheard of in HIV therapy. And the genesis of that idea and one others, we also have a drug that was depicted on the cover of Nature 2 weeks ago for the Ebola disease. And that drug is in clinical testing right now. It also involves targeting disease. So the idea, not that I had that insight, certainly I didn't have that insight as a grad student, but the idea, the dream of delivering a drug specifically to tissues, I think can be traced to UMass. And again, thank you, UMass. Keep people dreaming. Thank you.